Hello YouTube, it's Barbara Jean. Okay, I think I've got the secret here to make sure that I can have videos that are running a little bit longer. Um, anyway, we'll see what happens here. I was lucky with my last one. It went all the way up into 20 plus minutes and it didn't go, go cuckoo on me, but I think I'm beginning to understand why. But anyway, I want to go through the book of Revelation just a little tiny bit and point out a couple things I thought were interesting. Now, these are just things of interest, things that I thought were rather interesting, like I said in my last video. How Jesus describes himself to each church is very interesting and different. He describes himself differently to each church. Um, the Church of Ephesus, which is the premier Gentile church, um, it, all these churches actually existed at the same time in Asia Minor, or Turkey, as it were. This is where they all existed at the same time when Paul planted these churches. And like I said, he was the premier apostle for the Gentiles. Peter was the premier apostle, period, because he started for the Jew first. So the Bible says the Jew first and then the Greek, or the Gentile. And anybody who's not Jewish is Gentile. And so therefore, when Paul was the premier apostle for the Gentile church, basically, because we didn't have the Torah, we really needed a lot more instruction on how to walk godly lives, to walk according to God's will. He gave us basically the foundation for um, church function, okay, um, church living, and there were some differences. I mean, the laws of God, if you look at the Ten Commandments, they still apply because they're all practical and good laws to follow. But you see, the Gentile church didn't even, I mean, the Gentiles didn't even have the Ten Commandments to live by. We don't follow the full Torah because Jesus put all those works under, basically, he fulfilled all those laws when he was sacrificed on the cross. There are a lot of good things that we still do, but we're not obliged to, for instance, the blood sacrifices and all the other obligations that the Jewish people were obliged to do in order to keep the race pure from evil influences and satanic infiltration, the genetic pool clean, so that Jesus Christ could be born into the world. Okay, that was really the purpose of all those laws and rules and sacrifices, is to keep the gene pool clean so that Jesus Christ could come into the world. Okay, now that's beside the point. But I wanted to look at this for a moment. Revelations chapter 2, and this premier church, which was Church of Ephesus, and we know that there are 7 churches that actually describe each church age. These churches were chosen. There were more churches. There were many churches in all of Palestine. In those days, it was called Palestine, and Samaria and Syria and all those places, Turkey and Greece and even Rome. There were many churches that grew up because they were home churches. So there were basically hundreds of home churches that were had been built at this time. But the premier church that Jesus chose to use as an example for his first church and all the things that through the first dispensation, or the first church age, was the Church of Ephesus. And he describes himself this way. Um, These things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. Now, I don't know why, for some reason, that I don't understand why he would describe himself this way to the premier church, except for one thing. Um, in their judgment, because they have fallen from their first love, this church is very they 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 love the laws that were given to them. They love the principles of good living. They love all those things, but they've fallen away from their love of Christ in this church. Um, they haven't held to the full doctrine. Basically, they've left the teachings of grace and are now starting to fall into the ways of man by losing Christ. They're losing Jesus in their, even though their love for Christian living, they were losing Christ in this church, and this is what it says. Um, we know this is the premier, the first dispensational church, because it says they, in verse 2, that they have tried them that say they are apostles and are not, and found them to be liars. So these people knew that had good Christian principles, they had good doctrine, and were able to discern who was a real apostle and who was not. So that's why this is the premier or the base church that all the other churches are based on, are like a rainbow. Like the rainbow, the base color is red. I've said this in one of my other videos. I think Over the Rainbow. I think that was my video where I talked about colors. And red represents the church of Ephesus. It's the base color in which all the other colors are layered upon. So this church had a good foundation, but they lost Christ. For it says so here. Verse 4, nevertheless, I have somewhat, it's a big statement, somewhat, not a little bit, not a minuscule, but somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. Well, who's our first love? Jesus Christ. He should always be our premier love. He should always be our premier concern about who we're going to please in this world. Please, it's Jesus. It's Jesus who we should be thinking of, and they were not thinking of Jesus. So now he tells them in verse 5, remember therefore from whence thou hast fallen, and repent, and do the first work, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and will remove thy candlestick out of its place, except thou repent. So interestingly, in this uh, passage, he describes himself as the one who's holding the candlesticks, and then he threatens them. Basically, it's a threat to this church. If they don't repent and come back to Christ, they will lose their candlestick. They will be removed. And Jesus threatens them with a quick return. Well, you see, why would Jesus Christ coming to the church be a threat? Only in one place is it not a threat, and I'm going to show you that to you in a minute. This is what the point of this video is. I'm going to show you the difference between what Jesus Christ says to each church, and how only one church, this is not a threat, but to this church, it is a threat. And he threatens them, if they don't repent and come back to the love of Christ. They may love the principles of Christ, but unless they love Christ, their candlestick will be removed. They are removing Jesus from the scenario. How can you do that? It's not going to last. You can't build a foundation without Christ, because Christ is the foundation. He is the one that holds the 7 candlesticks. He is the husband. He is the candle lighter. He is everything. He's our husband, and therefore to remove Christ from the scenario is a very, very terrible thing. And this is what he's telling them: if you don't repent and come back to your first love, come back to Jesus, you'll have your candlestick removed. Okay, now I want to go on to the next church, and he says to the church of Smyrna, this is the persecuted, the martyred church. Now we know that the martyred church is continuing from the time since the church began. Stephen was the first martyr, but then there was others who were martyred. They were pursued by the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the first of the synagogue of Satan. That's what I'm telling you. The Pharisees were the ones that were the first to persecute the church. They're the ones who wanted Jesus dead. It wasn't the Romans who wanted Jesus dead. It was the Pharisees who wanted Jesus dead. And they pursued Jesus. They tried to kill Jesus right from the start. Okay? And they're the ones who were the first to pursue the church, to kill the church. The Luciferians that call themselves Jews, but are actually of the synagogue of Satan. They put on the name of Jew, but they are not true Jews, because they do not hold to the Torah, they hold to the Talmud. Okay? And these evil people are mentioned here. The synagogue of Satan is mentioned here. They're the ones who actually begin the pursuit of the church. Now, as the church spread throughout all the Gentile nations, of course, not just those Jewish Pharisees were pursuing the church, but also other churches, other religions and other peoples also tried to eradicate the church. Heathens and the Romans and all the rest all tried to eradicate the church, uh, to pursue it and kill it. It could not do so. Um, this church, it's interesting the way he describes himself. Just the way he describes himself here. And unto the church of Smyrna, these things saith the first and last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. There's a second time we've seen this verse. We've seen it in the Church of Philadelphia, and we see it here. The synagogue of Satan. But it's interesting the way he describes himself. He describes himself as the first and the last, and which was dead and is alive. Now, why would he describe himself that way? Because he was the first to be martyred by these Pharisees in this new dispensation of the church age. He is the first. He is the premier. He was crucified on the cross, and he was. Then he was now. He was killed, but now he's alive. He was raised from the dead. So he will be the ones that he, like Christ. These people will be raised from the dead. Okay, because of their martyrdom. Um, um, So he tells them not to fear those who were going to try them and put them in prison and kill them. And they will be receiving a crown. Now he goes down here and he talks to them. Verse 11, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the church. He that overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. So this church is going to be put to death. This is, like I said, the martyred church. Those thrown into prison and killed for their faith in Jesus Christ. This is the persecuted and martyred church. They will not be hurt overcome by this second death. Where do we see the second death? We see the second death. Actually, let me just go off topic just for a moment and just show you that this interesting term, second death, shows up in a couple of places. Shows up in the Revelation chapter 11, shows up in Revelation chapter 6, chapter 20, verse 6. That's when this church is resurrected. It says they will not be hurt by the second death. This church is not raptured. This is not a raptured church. But this church is given a great promise because of their martyrdom, that they will be resurrected, and you'll find their resurrection. In the first resurrection occurs Revelation 20, verse 6, and also Revelation 20, verse 14. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. Okay, so the second death, the first death is where the souls are going right now, down into hell. The second death is when you're cast into the lake of fire. That is the second death. Revelation 21:8. But the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and warmongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, boy, we shouldn't keep that in mind. People think that lying is not a bad sin. Well, there it is right there. All liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Okay, so that's why I just wanted to point that out. Because this, I wanted to go to the end here. So the promise is he doesn't threaten them that he's going to come quickly to this church. There's no threat to this church because of their martyrdom. They're given crowns and they're promised to rule and reign with Christ on earth, with the first resurrection, and he that overcometh shall not be hurt by the second death. So it starts out with him talking about their poverty and that Jesus was the first to be killed by these synagogue of Satan. He was the first to be killed in this dispensation, and he is now alive. It's a promise. His resurrection is a promise to these people, and their reward is that they will not be harmed by the second death. Okay. Now the church of Pergamos, things start going really, really wrong with this church. This is when they start allowing Satan's deception, lies, and his doctrines start coming into this church. The um, Babylonian ideas start to infiltrate this church. And this is the way he describes himself to this church. This is the church of Pergamos. Verse 12, and to the angel of the church of Pergamos write these things, which saith he which hath the sharp sword with the two edges. So he describes himself with a sharp two-edged sword. What is a two-edged sword? It's his word, because if you go down here, verse 16, he has something to say against this church. They love religious things. They love the religious. I think this church, if you think of the Catholic Church, they love the religious things, the mystery and the spiritual kind of mystery. And if you ever gone to a Catholic church, and I have, there is kind of a sacredness about the whole thing. And there's a lot of Catholics who love the Lord. I'm not having anything against Catholics themselves. There's a lot of Catholics that cling to Jesus Christ. But there's a lot of evil Babylonian doctrine that has infiltrated this church. And one of the things they have is idolatry and paganism. And it's interesting. I want you to see something here about this church. It's really interesting. He tells them to repent of this Babylonian false doctrine that has infiltrated the church. And he tells them to repent in verse 16. He says, repent, or else I will come unto thee quickly. There's another threat from the Lord. And it's not a good thing that he's telling them, I'm going to come quickly. He's telling them, repent, or I'm going to come before you're ready for me. Okay? And you're not going to like it. It's a threat. And will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. So in the beginning, he describes himself as he that hath a two-edged sword. And then he tells them in verse 16 to repent, or else he will fight against these people with the sword of his mouth. So it's interesting that this church is overcome. How you defeat the evil's doctrines in this church is with the truth. The word is sharper than any two-edged sword. And that's in the scriptures. It is sharper than. So this word, Jesus, his word, will defeat this church of Balaam, this Babylonian doctrines. The truth will set these people apart from these false teachers and false doctrine. And interesting, let's go into the reward here. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh, I will give to eat the hidden manna, and give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saith he that receiveth. Now, what's interesting here is that the reward that these people get for overcoming idolatry and Balaam, Babylonian worship in the church, by overcoming, they will be given hidden manna, they will be given heavenly bread, and they will be given a white stone with their name on it, a new name. Just think about this. What are most idols made of? They're made of stone, and they're usually white. And so this church, those who overcome the desire to worship idols, will be given a stone with their own name on it, because they have overcome idolatry and the Babylonian religion that have been infiltrating this church. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. Then let's just go on to the church of Thyatira. I'm going to have to make this my last of this video. And unto the church of Thyatira write these things, saith the Son of God. Now this is the Jezebel church, the witchcraft church, the church who are under the manipulation of Jezebel. And they love their works They love good charity. They love to do good things. And Jesus does not rebuke them for the good things that they do, their charity, their missionary works. Um, um, but he has something against them because they're under the spell of this Jezebel, who's teaching them some very wrong things. And also to eat things sacrificed to idols. So again, idolatry is a part of this whole thing. Pagan worship, but they have good. There's some good things about them, but they have some not so good things about them because they have suffered Jezebel, because they have suffered the spirit of witchcraft, um, and fornication. And he tells them, uh, in this one, I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. Therefore he will cast her on into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repeat of their deeds. And I will kill her children with death. And all the churches shall know that I am he that which searches out the reins of the heart, and I will give unto everyone according to your works. So this church is judged according to their works, but if they do not repent of this Jezebel spirit, they will be cast into beds of sickness. Sickness is part of this Jezebel, blinding. Um, Interesting. This I will kill her children with death. What is that? Plague. I think death. That maybe is referring to plagues perhaps. Um, but anyway, he searches their heart, and he doesn't threaten them with coming quickly, but he does threaten them with plague. Okay, which we see actually we saw that in Europe, and actually a lot of the world, who were plagued by the Black Death. Satan is trying to start. You can see even today how this witchcraft spirit is trying to start new plagues and epidemics. Every time you turn around, they're trying to get something started to overcome the world, to kill the world. But the Lord's not allowing that, because the church is overcoming the Jezebel spirit, that witchcraft spirit, that plague, the spirit of plagues. He's actually, the church, the bride of Christ, is overcoming the Jezebel spirit. So that's why Satan, although he's trying, you can see he's trying to kill the world with plagues through the spirit of Jezebel, this witchcraft spirit. This Jezebel will not overcome the church. So as much as Satan would like to destroy the world with plague, God will not allow it. But we did see him almost succeed. This Jezebel spirit almost succeed in the Middle Ages, when the Black Plague it would kill millions of people. The Black Plague, and this is you see the New World Order trying to bring back the bubonic plague. They're trying, but they cannot because the church has already overcome Jezebel. So as much as they'd like to, God will not allow it. And this spirit, those people who overcome the Jezebel spirit, this witchcraft spirit, um, verse 26, and he that overcometh and keepeth my word until the end, will I give him power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of potters shall be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. And I will give him the morning star. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. It's interesting what he gives them, this church. He gives them, if they overcome the Jezebel spirit, they will be given power. If you think about that, the Jezebel spirit has power over this church. This Jezebel spirit is manipulating and deceiving and controlling this church. But if you overcome the Jezebel spirit, you will be given power over the nations. He describes himself. He describes himself. Oh, I forgot what to mention. What he described himself in verse 18. These things he is the Son of God, who hath eyes like the flame of fire, and feet are like fine brass. Now, this is interesting. I don't really understand why he describes himself this way, except perhaps to think that his eyes being flames of fire, meaning he sees everything. He's looking at this church. He sees their works. He is judging them by their works because he's very aware that what they're doing, but he also judges their heart. So those who are doing these works but are under the influence of Jezebel and have not overcome her will be cast into death, to beds of sickness, or be killed by the plagues of that Jezebel has through this witchcraft spirit. Um, but his feet, he describes himself as having feet of like fine brass. Now, why he tells this church this, I'm not sure. Feet are represent the gospel. I know that they spread the gospel of peace. Feet represent the gospel, the spreading of the gospel. So I'm not really sure why he describes himself that way to this church, except that maybe this church hasn't received the full gospel, which is grace and freedom. Um, they're under they're under control of this witchcraft, and they haven't been set free. And the gospel is freedom. So maybe he's describing himself with the eyes of flames of fire that actually seek the hearts of men, that can see into your very heart and burn away these evil things that are controlling mankind, that allow them to be controlled by this Jezebel, and that they haven't yet received. They need to receive the full gospel. They only have partial gospel. They're spreading the word because they're missionary oriented people, they're works oriented, they're charity oriented, but they haven't allowed themselves to be fully engulfed in the full gospel, which is you will be set free. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Because remember, they're still enslaved to Jezebel. But the gospel sets you free. Perhaps that's what it means. I don't know. I'm just kind of going through it myself. Um, but anyway, these people are promised, if they overcome the Jezebel spirit, to be given power over the nations, and um, not just power, but they will rule with a rod of iron. These people will be stout hearted. Nothing will sway them from. Nothing will allow them to be manipulated again. Let's put it that way. They will shall rule with a rod of iron. They will be strong and powerful people in the kingdom because they have overcome the Jezebel spirit. And they will also be given the morning star. I'm not quite sure why he tells them that, but they will be receiving the morning star. Maybe for all their charity works, they're given this special star. So they overcome Jezebel, and because of all their charity and their good works, they're given this wonderful reward of the morning star. Now, what exactly that means, somebody else probably knows better than I, but I'm just going to put it there for the moment. Now, I'm just going to stop this video for now and go on to finishing the churches in my next video. God bless.